Welcome back to our channel where we provide updates and undisclosed narratives on Catherine, Princess of Wales and her royal family. We are excited to share the following news. King Charles officially ends his son's future and reveals Harry's biggest mistake. A person with knowledge of the situation has said that Prince Harry has committed the most significant error of his whole life, when he did not anticipate that King Charles would take action to put a stop to his lying. We are going to find out what King Charles has done with Harry's lying right now in this video. There is a line in the sand that King Charles III has drawn, and that is his refusal to provide any protection for Prince Harry that relies on government money. But this was not a straightforward disagreement between family members. Rather, it was the public activation of a constitutional concept that was icy and unyielding. The world is now gaining an understanding of what occurs when the crown interprets a prince's need for protection as a desire for privilege without the burden of responsibility. It was not a discussion. Rather, it was a statement of principle that severed the last surviving strands of institutional commitment. The phrase that rang from the stone walls of Buckingham Palace was brutally straightforward. It said, "Public protection follows public duty." In no way was it an attempt to evoke feelings. It was a definitive, unchangeable constitutional reality, according to people close to the king who corroborated our understanding. Tabloids and the Sussex's own media machinery had for a number of months skillfully portrayed the contentious dispute about Prince Harry's safety as a very personal family drama. It was a tale of a boy who was terrified, a father who was worried, and a system that was unable to successfully safeguard one of its own. In addition to the filing of lawsuits and the delivery of emotional interviews, the story was one of existential dread and the isolation of the family. However, King Charles III made a significant shift in the conflict's axis by issuing a single unrefined statement in the middle of December. This statement was delivered after extensive deliberations between the palace, the Home Office, and the Royal and VIP Executive Committee RAVEC. There was no longer any concern for the sentiments of a son. This reassertion of the old covenant between the crown and its people was so clinical that it was practically surgical in nature. The comment suggested that the monarchy does not exist to provide solace to its members. Rather, the members of the monarchy exist to serve the monarchy and directly or indirectly the state. The vocabulary of the palace, which had been perfected over centuries of effective crisis management, was used with frightening accuracy. It was required of the assistants who were discussing the background that they highlight that the ruling was not punitive. The tell-all interviews, the devastating book, and the films that were available on Netflix were not the targets of this reprisal. They claimed that it was an issue of continuity in the situation. An individual who had a prominent courtier position was believed to have quietly said, "The standards have not altered. The conditions have." This distinction is the foundation upon which the contemporary monarchy of the United Kingdom is able to continue existing. According to the unwritten constitution of the United Kingdom, protection from the state is not a birthright that is conferred by heredity. It is a tool that is accessible to those individuals who actively represent the country in the public arena and, as a result, take risks on behalf of the nation. It is a functional requirement. Rather than being a benefit for the person, it serves as a shield for the office. Lineage does not guarantee it. Rather, it is contingent upon service. A kingdom of rules, regardless of sentiment. According to several reports from people who were there, King Charles took a firm stance in the chambers that were characterized by their wood paneling and peaceful atmosphere. In order to clear away the emotional cloud that had been around the matter for a number of years, he asked that the organization get back to its most fundamental values. In no uncertain terms, he rejected the repeated efforts by certain individuals to frame the argument as a question of fatherly sympathy throughout the course of the discussion. According to reports, he stated that compassion could not be permitted to establish a precedent that may potentially undermine the fundamental pillars upon which the monarchy is built. He reminded his advisers that the institution does not exist by creating exceptions for favored people. Rather, it lives by applying its norms in a consistent and unflinching manner, particularly during times when the demand to bend them is at its most severe. Before being summarized for the general public, the conditions for state protection were reaffirmed inside the state to the extent that they were legally binding. They developed a checklist that they used to evaluate Prince Harry's position, and they discovered that he did not meet the criteria. The first need is active service to the Crown, which is defined as a program of public tasks that are regular, planned, and responsible. The second factor is institutional exposure, which indicates that the risk must be produced by serving the state and not by private economic activities or personal notoriety. A non-negotiable demand for the upfront submission of travel dates and locations in order to facilitate professional security planning is the third condition, which is operational collaboration. In conclusion, non-commercial behavior is a guarantee that an individual who is relying on public resources is not concurrently using their regal position for the purpose of gaining personal gain. According to each and every one of these measurements, the conclusion was not only completely inescapable, but also quite harsh. Prince Harry did not meet the requirements. The palace made it a point to make it clear that this was not a fresh judgment that was isolating itself in a moment of rage. At the beginning of the year 2020, when he and Meghan Markle made the announcement that they were leaving their senior royal responsibilities, his automatic right to round-the-clock police protection had formally come to an end. Following a review, Harry filed an appeal against that ruling in the High Court, and eventually the British legal system affirmed the verdict. The legislation itself had not changed. Rather, what had changed was the King's willingness to openly explain the implications of the law without offering an apology or equivocation. There is a significant amount of institutional weight associated with this stress on constitutional clarity. One may say that the British monarchy functions inside a delicate equilibrium that is meticulously balanced. The taxpayers provide the funding, Parliament provides the legitimacy, and the public trust, which is frequently ethereal, is what keeps it going. Each and every individualized arrangement, as well as each and every discrete exception made for a member of the family, causes a potentially hazardous ripple. Charles realized that any informal workaround for his son would be viewed as a grave breach of his duty in an age that was already badly wounded by public wrath over Prince Andrew's scandals and the perception of a two-tiered system of justice. This was the case in an era that had both of these factors. There would be no silent authorizations, and there would be no discretionary shielding that relied on a complex duchy fund to pay for it. It was necessary to draw the line in public so that everyone could see it. Charles was channeling the brilliant and sometimes merciless pragmatism of his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, who realized that the survival of the crown hinged on its capacity to detach emotion from affairs of state. In doing so, Charles was channeling the pragmatism of his maternal grandmother. It was not simply Harry who received the message. It was a message to the ministers of the government, to the courts, to the taxpayers of the United Kingdom, and to the stern judgment of history itself. If you walk away from the job, you step away from the safeguards. The commodification of fear and the commodification of the narrative war. Prince Harry had been able to successfully prosecute his case in the court of public opinion for a number of years, building a powerful narrative that was centered on one unwavering claim that he and his family were in mortal danger, and that to return to the United Kingdom without state-funded security was to risk a tragic repeat of the fate that had befallen his mother. The emotional motor that drove a chain reaction of legal lawsuits, media appearances, and public statements was this visceral anxiety, regardless of whether it was real or purposefully exacerbated. It was a story of a prince who was left alone, a wife who was not protected, and children who were exposed to a press that was hungry for information and dangers that were not visible. The announcement made by King Charles and the accompanying series of official briefings made it painfully evident that this story was constructed on a basis of selective disclosures and a basic misunderstanding, or possibly an intentional misuse, of how institutional security truly works. This was made clear by the fact that the cascade of official briefings that followed. The RAVEC, which is in charge of royal security, is a bureaucratic and cold-blooded calculation. The danger assessments from MI5 and Scotland Yard, the amount of public exposure from official activities, and most importantly, the subject's complete compliance with security regulations are the key components of this tiered structure. In contrast to being inherited by blood, it is gained through service. Government officials had been expressing their severe anger behind the scenes for a considerable amount of time. There was a pattern of conduct that clearly contradicted the public representations of dread according to sources inside the Home Office who talked anonymously about it. On many occasions, Prince Harry had failed to submit his travel itinerary in advance of his travels to the United Kingdom. This made it difficult for security teams to undertake advance reconnaissance, chart safe routes, or deploy the required resources. Despite his need for complete police protection, Prince Harry had failed to submit his travel schedules. The statement was made by a former high-ranking official who said, "It is not an issue of whether someone is loved or loathed. It is all about the technique. There is no way to safeguard a ghost." Not only did Prince Harry demand security, but he also wanted it to be on his own terms and whenever it was convenient for him. This weakens the whole security architecture that the state has in place. With only a few days before his legal team was in court, claiming that his life was in continuous danger, the inconsistency became blatantly obvious when a CCTV film that has now gone viral emerged. The clip showed the prince strolling alone and seeming unconcerned on a street in London with no visible bodyguards. The film sparked a raging controversy among the general public, which compelled them to ask a question that had previously been inconceivable. Was the dread the result of a performance, or was it genuine? When it came to responding, the Sussex media machine did it with lightning speed and a level of accuracy that was well honed. She tearfully described her life as a target, repeating long-standing accusations of racial bias and emotional abandonment by the royal family. Meghan Markle appeared on the cover of a major American magazine within 48 hours of Charles's declaration. The headline of the magazine was "Unprotected." The accompanying interview was also emotional. According to the observations of media specialists, the timing was flawless. During the same week, it was revealed that her upcoming book will be available for pre-order, as well as the debut of her new series that was created by Netflix. With each act of institutional boundary setting by the monarchy, the Sussex camp responded with a pre-coordinated media release depicting them not only as victims, but as symbols of resistance against a harsh and outdated system. This pattern had become indisputable and could no longer be denied. However, the patience of the general people, especially in Britain, was becoming more precarious. A person who had previously worked as a royal reporter for the BBC made the following observation. When every retort is related to a product launch, it becomes more impossible to differentiate between real anguish and calculated profit. and this is the stance that the monarchy has now decided to choose to defend. The reigning monarch and the debt of £1.75 million. As the public drama of security and feeling played out on the front pages, a struggle that was taking place in the accounting chambers of Clarence House and via the diplomatic channels between London and Sacramento was taking place in a more subdued and far more crucial manner. In the middle of it all was a figure of unflinching integrity, and that person was Princess Anne. As the royal who was tasked with overseeing the operations of the institution, particularly in light of Charles's recent health challenges, the Princess Royal had been given a portfolio that the majority of royals would do their best to avoid at all costs. This portfolio included the management of legacy disruptions, which is a palace euphemism for the mess that was left behind by Princes Andrew and Harry. At the end of the year 2025, Anne's office presented the Lord Chamberlain with a formal report on the results of an internal audit. Leaked in part to the press, the material proved very destructive. Between the years 2022 and 2024, it detailed an astounding amount of £1.75 million worth of unreimbursed security-related charges that were associated with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's travel and public engagements during the period. Forensic analysis revealed the following breakdown: $520,000 for temporary police deployments during visits to the United Kingdom, $480,000 for diplomatic coordination costs related to a Commonwealth youth event in Canada, $312,000 for venue security for engagements in New York and The Hague billed via UK consular channels, and an astounding $265,000 for contingency protection officers who were dispatched but ultimately unused due to Harry's failure to provide a final itinerary. Even though there had been earlier agreements and a number of private reminders given via the legal team of the Sussexes, none of these fees had been returned. This was the most damaging finding that revealed the situation. At the end of November, Princess Anne, who is well known for her budgetary responsibility and her intolerance for waste, made a move that had never been done before. She gave her approval for a formal communication to be sent to the Office of the Attorney General of California, alerting them that the expenses of security that the British government had expended had been categorized as an official financial dispute. It was not only a matter of financial gain, rather it was a demonstration of war. This made the debt a public and political matter that could no longer be discreetly wiped by a royal slush fund. It put the debt on an international financial record, which made it a public and political issue. During the course of the internal communication, Anne expressed the hope that transparency would provide solutions where discretion has failed. Conversely, there was complete quiet. The payment did not come. There was no official acknowledgement of the event. According to reports, King Charles was quite enraged, and he referred to the scenario that was taking place behind closed doors as Andrew 2.0, but cloaked in California morality. The specter of his brother's disgrace loomed huge. An uproar of public disapproval had been sparked by the settlement of £12 million that was given to Virginia Giuffre. This payment was financed via mysterious royal financial procedures. One of the most painful lessons that Charles had to learn was that the monarchy could no longer afford to act as a private ATM for its members who had done something wrong. According to reports, he instructed his advisors, "We defend our name by preserving our standards." That implies that you have to say no. A modernized, protocol-driven crown won a philosophical triumph against an older, family-centric model that had often stressed unity above accountability. Princess Anne's uncompromising attitude was a success for the crown in terms of its philosophical approach. She clarified her stance at a meeting with the Privy Council, which the Privy Council attended. According to reports, she gave the following statement: "Any action to eliminate or absorb this debt would be a betrayal not of the monarch, but of the people." The only reason we serve the crown is because it is common knowledge that we serve the nation. Eliminating this would be equivalent to erasing that trust. The message was unmistakable. The problem was no longer limited to Harry alone. In other words, he was the example that came before. A title on the brink. The final reckoning. In conclusion, in light of the fact that the disagreements on finances and security had reached a boiling point, King Charles called his most senior advisors to Windsor Castle for what was referred to as a red line debate. The topic was no longer just about money or protection. The entire integrity of the royal family and the titles that it bestows was something that was at stake. A slow-burning conclusion had now culminated in a moment of clarity for Charles. In the 21st century, a royal title could no longer be a decorative inheritance apart from duty and responsibility. This revelation had been building up for quite some time. Harry and Meghan had managed to save their most important asset, the titles of Duke and Duchess of Sussex, despite the fact that they had resigned from their positions in 2020. The ducal title gave an essential veneer of quasi-official prestige, opening doors and demanding fees that Mr. and Mrs. Mountbatten Windsor were never able to achieve. Despite the fact that they no longer used the HRH style, the ducal title was valuable. However, as their economic endeavors expanded and their assaults on the institution became more intense, the palace started to see this arrangement through a new lens that was more critical. If a title is utilized to gain advantages, establish brand equity, and demand public resources while purposefully avoiding public duty, then it is no longer a title, revealed a senior courtier. Those are all things that are considered to be public duties. It is a gap in the law. In addition, institutional dangers are lurking in the shadows. Additionally, the king was in accord. The idea of title integrity was divided into 3 separate levels, with the first level consisting of active working royals like the Prince of Wales. The second level was comprised of royals who were not now in active service. A paper containing confidential advice was drafted. In the second layer of coverage, non-working royals who continued to adhere to the constraints imposed by the institution were covered. Examples of such royals are the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. A third tier, which was referred to as compromised titles, was also present. This layer was used by those who were actively benefiting from royal ties, despite the fact that they were not actively engaging in royal duty. The paper indicates that Harry and Meghan have now established themselves as members of this group in a definite and comprehensive manner. The communications that Charles sent to the general public took on a more specific tone. He made a statement that was impossible to misinterpret while he was presenting a lecture at the Royal College of Defense Studies. Titles like trust are obtained not by lineage alone, but by action, according to what he stated. However, the House of Windsor does not exist with the intention of glorifying the past. Rather, it exists in order to serve the present. The claim to the service's symbols must likewise be cancelled in the event that the service is suspended or discontinued. Rapid and overwhelmingly enthusiastic responses came from members of the general public. The results of a survey that was carried out by YouGov indicate that 69% of people living in the United Kingdom are in support of removing all of Harry's titles that he still holds. Following the presentation of their respective reasons, the public and the Crown together arrived at a conclusion. The participation of Meghan in a live-stream panel discussion was one of her reactions. During the course of the conversation, she reframed the monarchy's boundary setting as a kind of control and silence. This time around, however, the tale was not able to achieve the same level of success in generating momentum. The glaring discrepancies that were at the foundation of the Sussex brand that they were pushing began to emerge, and even favorable American media sources began to investigate them. The preparations for a historic constitutional gesture that would entail the invocation of a royal warrant of revocation began on the back burner behind the scenes. Despite the fact that it is not without precedence, an action of this sort is quite rare. In 1917, King George V removed his German ancestors from their British titles. This occurred during World War I. As a result of her divorce in 1996, Diana, Princess of Wales, began to lose her HRH flair. Undoubtedly, the United Kingdom was the location of both of these occurrences. The year 2022 also saw the departure of Prince Andrew from the honorary military roles he had held before. With the execution of the warrant, they would be reclassified in all official papers, which would lead to the official removal of the titles of Duke and Duchess of Sussex. This would be the outcome of the formal removal of the titles. There would be no way to change the restriction, since it would be the absolute limit. The statement that this is not exile was emphasized by one of the palace's assistants. In this sense, a formal distinction has been established. Regarding the possibility of the monarchy closing a door, there is no danger. The conclusion of this chapter is now in sight. Because the House of Windsor is making further progress, there will be no more examples of quiet tolerance in the future. By wagering that the people and history would accept a monarchy based on rules rather than one based on sentiment, Charles, King of England, had taken a risk when he made this wager. When a king is still battling his own illness while still carrying the weight of the nation, it is hard to overestimate the significance of the position that he is now facing. Even if it involves getting in contact with his own child in order to do this, it would seem that accountability will live on as his legacy. The warrant, despite the fact that it is still in reserve, marks the beginning of a new time in which royal position is not a permanent guarantee, but rather a conditional honor. This new period will begin even though the warrant is still in reserve. As a result of holding the line, it is probable that Charles has finally managed to fulfill the requirements. This was done not just to protect the crown from having to deal with a scandal, but also to protect it from the steady and gradual decline that was taking place from inside. At this point, there is more to this than the resolution of a disagreement inside the family. This is a realignment of an institution that has been in existence for 1,000 years, and the price that is being paid for it is tears, trust, and titles. Thanks for watching the video. Please tell us what you think and then say goodbye for now.